Welcome to Colored Minds on Brimbank Live. We're your hosts, AD and Lydia, just waiting on our third co host, Roshani. And today we have a really exciting show running from yesterday's little introduction about our series with all things to do with discrimination, anti discrimination, and equal opportunity for CALD and minority communities in all facets of society. So today we have a really special guest. I'm really excited, Mohammed Semra. And Mohammed is a public speaker. He's a humanitarian, co-founder of Endeavour Youth Australia. He ran for council last year. He's a peace ambassador, and the list goes on and on. So welcome, Mohammed.
Thank you for having me today. I'm looking forward to the session.
Yeah, we're really, really excited to have you. And the reason we have you here today is because you've had some experiences, not so positive ones, that you've really turned around and used as a catalyst to where you are now. And we really wanted you to share that with us. So can you briefly give us a little summary of your story, of your tale, and how you came to be where you are right now?
Okay, if I was to be completely honest, I never imagined myself being in the position that I am today. I grew up with a very severe stutter. So growing up, as you can imagine, I was distant from a lot of the extracurricular activities at the school. I never spoke publicly in the class. I never presented in front of the class. So according to one speech therapist, it was one of the worst stutters that she's come across. So my body used to rock, my head used to twitch, tongue used to come out. So it was very tough on me, and for a very long time, it halted me from doing the things that I wanted to do. And because of that, I guess I didn't pursue this leadership. I didn't pursue public speaking. So I guess I put myself in a bubble, right? And so what that led to is I got into a lot of trouble growing up, right? Used to get suspended. At one point, I almost got expelled, right? So yeah, there was a lot of and coupled with the bias that I saw heavily at my school, yeah, I guess it just made it seem so hard to, I guess, try and escape that narrative. And I did for a long time give up. I was like, okay, there's no way that I can accomplish anything. But after that, I guess meeting new people and meeting mentors and meeting the certain individuals that I guess impacted my life and identified my potential and invested in that. I guess that made me the person that I am today.
Wow, from stutter to big dog. I love that. What a success story. And I think the reason we got you on today was, to kind of bolster this conversation around discrimination and anti-discrimination. And I know you went through something that has been recorded, has been shown around schools to kind of promote the fact that these negative things are happening, these injustices. Can you tell us a little bit about, that story, that huge story that's, all over the place?
And so is this a standing up schools video?
It's the high point situation.
Okay, the high point. Yep. So when I was year 10, a group of friends and I so went inside the store, and I think the new iPhone would have been released that time. So we went inside to have a look at it, right? And from the very moment that we went in, we saw like the whole environment like beginning to shift within the security and like the employees. And so we were getting surrounded by two security guards, and they kept like greasing us off, giving us this negative energy. And I asked him, I was like, oh, I'm like, was there a problem? And he was like, no, but there's gonna be. I'm like, what do you mean by that? He was like, you know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know what you mean, And I was just like, it was very clear that they didn't want us there, right? And it was very clear that there was a bias against us. And it's not like we were the only students in there. There was a lot of students from other schools in there, but the difference between us and them is that they were wearing blazers and they weren't of our complexion. So I didn't feel welcome in there, so I'm not going to stay in a place that I'm not welcome. So we left, and then as we're leaving, he made a hand gesture to us, and a very disrespectful one, right? And then I was like, it's my right to be in that store. Like, why should I have to leave, right? So then we tried coming back, and they was like, no, you guys aren't coming back. that's when we started recording. You know, because like, okay, this is not right. And then that's when the manager, not knowing anything that has happened, said what he said. Right? That they're just afraid that we might steal something. Like, I've never stolen in my life.
Just
so
blatantly, straight up.
Yeah, straight up, yeah.
I don't know how I would have felt in that regard. I mean, like, I think a lot of people in our situation with our complexion are kind of desensitized because you would have heard it at least once in your life where someone has made you feel uncomfortable in the place you're in, or who have either overtly or covertly made you feel like you're about to do something wrong, you're automatically criminalized, and you're just seen as a collective as opposed to an individual. I mean, with any skin color, there are good and there are bad. So it's just kind of really painful when you walk down the street and you're automatically grouped into this, I don't know, idea of who you're supposed to be. And I think a lot of people start acting out on that. And I don't want to say rightly so, but when you call someone a thief enough times, eventually they'll start doing something, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden they turn around and say, see, we knew it all along. But what came first, the chicken or the egg type thing, right?
So, what unfolded beforehand? I'm interested, sorry, not beforehand, directly after, because obviously you guys were quite vulnerable, you were young, and having gone through that experience, I can imagine it would have been difficult to deal with it effectively, especially in the moment. So what was your immediate reaction? And then later when you reflected and you got the sort of guidance or support, how did you handle the situation?
Yeah, the immediate reaction for me was just shock, and I couldn't help but find a bit of humor into it. Like, I was like, is guy serious? And I guess that was our way of like, okay, because we're used to it. If I'm going to be honest, right? I'll go to
exactly.
Point, I'll just keep getting like followed. Yeah, there's an assumption about my behavior and my intentions. But I guess the difference between what happened in Apple and what happened in every other store is that we got it on camera. So then afterwards, we were contemplating whether to post it or not. And so we decided that, okay, people need to see what's happening. So we did post it. And then the next day at school, we were approached by the principal who decided, okay, I guess the school understood that, okay, this is what's happening outside of the school. So maybe there's some of the, because we're always used to make accusations about the school, right? So we're always used to bring up certain topics in the school that was always shoved under the rug. And when Apple happened, then the school really had to confront discrimination and racism. So then that's when our school took a proactive approach. Okay, let's try and like have discussions. Let's try and help these kids out. So that's when we went with the principal and stuff. We got the apology from Apple. And then afterwards, Tim Cook released an email apologizing for the actions. And what they did after that was order the retraining of all Apple staff around the world in customer engagement. Yeah.
Wow, around the world following that incident.
Yeah.
Wow. And look at the power of media as well. I mean, what was it? Was it a thing at that time? It must have been a thing to start recording things, because it only started happening, I think, in the past maybe 5 years or so, that it became so prominent to record all of your actions. But back in the day, so many of these incidences would have happened and there would be no evidence to prove it because no one recorded it. It's just word of mouth. And
no opportunity. Exactly.
Yeah, we all know who ends up being believed when it comes to high up people or white people as opposed to, minorities or young people. So it's just a mess. So well done, first of all, for getting your camera out and recording that incident. It could have been a lot worse, whereby you started behaving badly because obviously you're being antagonized, but you chose to go down a different route. So it could have completely gone anyway.
Yeah, that's actually true, because it takes a lot to kind of put how you've been personally impacted by that situation aside for the bigger picture. So it's like if you guys responded in a different way and didn't end up capturing that content, Apple wouldn't have done that training around the globe, you know what I mean? Around the whole world. So it's like, it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of discipline in these situations because we are the victims. But it's definitely a story that is worthwhile highlighting for people because we can create change in those instances.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Welcome, third co-host Roshani.
I'm sorry, Mohammed. I think Mohammed was saying something. What was that?
Yes. If I was just to add on that, I feel like what happened with Apple had a rippling effect on how other businesses conduct themselves, because Apple's like the pinnacle of of success and stuff. And I feel like other companies followed suit after that. And then in Hypon in general, like I started getting a lot less follows, a lot less. I guess that stereotypes and those preconceptions about me slowly started. People started realizing their biases and stuff. But obviously, it still happens. But that was a small step. And if I was also to add, what that allowed me to do was set, I guess, my formula for activism moving forward.
Exactly.
And so what that showed me is, okay, like institutions have to be tackled, right? It has to be addressed at the highest level. That's when it can have that rippling effect, right? So just by Tim Cook sending out that email, all these like thousands, millions of people have been affected, right? And changed.
Honestly.
Yeah. So that's why in like racism in schools and stuff, I try to take that all the way to education department. And if it's to with like justice, then I guess starts with the Justice Department. It's not just like
highest place.
the highest place here. Institutions have to be changed, and policies need to be put in place.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Colored Minds with Roshani Lydia and myself, AD, and we have the wonderful guest Mohammed Semra, and we're talking all things discrimination, anti-discrimination, and what we can do about it.
Mohammed, hi. I have
Amazing
followed
story.
Hey, Roshani.
Okay. I've kind of followed the work that you've done, and I think that the big thing that we can see from it is just the power of people. And I think that when you were talking just then about how these institutions are made in this way, and we kind of need to do things in order to work to resist and work to challenge. And it is that email, or it's writing a letter, or it's kind of speaking to these larger, bigger companies and doing this work. What would you say to like young people who I guess are within these institutions, whether it's school, whether it's having these experiences themselves in particular shops? Like what I guess are the steps in order to kind of do something about what they may be experiencing in relation to discrimination?
Yep, that's a very important question. For me, I guess it was never about like changing the world per se, right? It's about, okay, how can I implement change within myself and those around me, right? And then after they start seeing that having an effect. So at my school, for instance, right, there was never an African in the leadership team. There was never an African debating team, right? And I saw that as a problem. So I was like, there's going to be a lot of like multicultural kids coming up in the school, not seeing that and self-rejecting because they don't see themselves represented in that position. So what I decided to do, I was like, okay, I'm going to take that step. So I decided to join the debating team, and like 3-4 months later, the whole debating team was now African, right? So all my friends decided to join, and we went undefeated like the whole year 12, and that was like the first
Wow.
year. Yeah. So for me,
so amazing.
So seeing the impact that had on my school and seeing how we were treated afterwards, it was a completely different. Like it changed the whole environment around school. Just 3-4 kids joining a debating team, and in the same way with the leadership team.
And it just takes one person to open that door. Like a lot of kids need to see that role model. They're always afraid to take that step. So you jumping into that role in the debating team, it really validated and opened up the door for so many kids that were just doubting themselves and were waiting for someone else to do it first. So it really shows the power of stepping outside of your comfort zone, not being afraid to be the first person to do something, because more often than not, there are a lot of people that are waiting to do the exact same thing. They just didn't have the courage.
Yeah, and obviously in our communities, we have to also acknowledge that we don't have that representation, On one hand, we can kind of say that it would be amazing for us to have the courage to be able to do these things, but it's also really difficult, and that's why it's hard. It's just you're an exceptional person who was able to kind of, muster up the courage to do something like that. And so it's really important for our communities to understand that we are at a disadvantage in that sense, and that when you don't see yourself like represented in certain spaces and areas to question that. And yeah, I like that you questioned it. You saw an issue in it, and you had the energy to do something about it. I wanted to go back and ask a question, because you mentioned that you had the stutter, and because of the stutter, you probably never considered doing certain things in like the leadership space or public speaking. But did you always have the heart for that and the passion for it, despite the stutter?
Yeah. So like growing up, I was always socially conscious. You know, I had a strong I had a strong belief on like what was right and what was wrong, and I had a lot of ideas about how to change it, but I never had a platform, right? Never a platform where I can go and express my views, and also having the starter, that was a big obstacle. But just to tell you guys how important one person can be in your life. So when I was in year 9, I had an English teacher, right? And I was very articulate in like writing and stuff, and she identified that, and she was like, okay, join debating. So she told me to join debating, and I told her, how can I join debating if I can't even speak? And so she went and she saw a speech therapist course for me to join. The school paid for it, 2 weeks intensive course, 8 to 4 p.m. And I came back from that course knowing how to speak from the very beginning. And it was like an epiphany for me. So I was like, okay, now I can go and do all the stuff that I wanted to do, right? And it wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for that one English teacher.
Absolutely, I agree with you. It often takes that one person to. It's the believing part, but it's also the investing in like someone part. But yeah,
I had one of those teachers. I feel like every person of color has a story of this, at least one teacher.
Yeah.
Because that's really what made me who I was. That's what made me tough in the school system when, so many times people and teachers and kids try to break me down. I just had that one teacher that just believed in me no matter what. And it really kept me going. So the power of just one person makes such a huge difference in people's lives. And
I think
Lydia.
it's I was just going to say quickly, just the mentorship of that, but also the advocacy in having someone who's going to advocate for you, who is going to kind of stick up for you and stick their neck out and perhaps give you those extra opportunities and resources and pathways. Like that is also so important when we're speaking, especially in the education space, of particular mentors that maybe teachers. It's about that support and that encouragement, but also that advocacy as well.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like on one hand, it's a support and whatnot, but really it's also access, because, when we have access to certain people and their time and their care for us, we have access to increased understanding of how things work or how we can improve in certain areas. These people that we're talking about are often our teachers or mentors or people in higher places who have walked a path before us. And I feel like it relates to this conversation more broadly, because when we're talking about discrimination and tackling it within the community and Australia, like Mohammed said, we're talking systematically always. Like you have to be in touch with something that's already, done it before, understands it. And I feel like as a Black community or a colored community, we need to really embrace the fact that in order to improve our situation in this country, we need to understand this country. Like we need to understand the system. And I mentioned that in the first episode, because Liz Gab, she really made that clear that, research has been done, like understanding the system, the political system, the way in which everything works will increase your quality of life, because you'll know how to navigate the system more effectively. And absolutely, I'm really interested in Mohammed for that reason, because he's taken that step to like actually navigate the political system within Australia, which is quite rare or quite overwhelming to do.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Coloured Minds on Brimbank Live with your hosts AD, Roshani, and Lydia, and a very special guest, Mohammed Semra, talking to us about discrimination and anti-discrimination and what we can do about it. So just going off Lydia's point, you did, I believe you used all of these experiences as a catalyst to get into the political sphere, get into the education system, to the justice system. And I feel like over the past few years, there have been more and more policy changes and structural changes to create or try to create an environment where there's more inclusion and diversity more consequences for racism and whatnot. What are some things that you've seen change since your time as, that kid that went to High Point and got told off for being who you are to now?
So I think one thing that was always there was that people understood that racism was bad, right? Or discrimination was not accepted. But one thing that no one wanted to have was a discussion. I think that's what changed. That's what I've seen the biggest change in the past 5 years. So people are now open about having a discussion around it, especially in schools. I remember every time I brought up discrimination and I brought up, or let's say out of emotional response and stuff like that, I'll call a teacher a racist, right? I didn't know how to articulate myself, but that's what I believed in. I called a teacher racist. I was sent out of class, right? I was sent to the coordinator's office, and I was threatened with suspensions. So it was nobody ever asked me, Mohammed, why do you think this is the case, right? But now I feel like schools are more engaged with trying to figure out, okay, what's the issues and what's the problems, and speaking about it and acknowledging that it does exist within the school environment, and acknowledging that things need to be done better. Also, I feel like cultural awareness is also something that's changed in the past few years. More schools are implementing trainings, more workplaces are implementing trainings, and so there's the two biggest things that I've seen change.
And that goes hand in hand with the openness or the willingness to talk about it,
I don't know. I feel like, although there are all these policy changes and so many people saying, yeah, look at us doing this and we're providing training here and we're willing to listen, do you think that it's a smokescreen, or do you think that there's actual things that are changing? Do you know what I mean?
Okay, I'll give you guys an example, right? I think so. Discussions are being made, trainings have been done, but the same things are happening. So what I'll do is through Endeavour Youth Australia. So I go to different schools and speak to kids and do workshops. So a lot of the kids that I speak to, right, are scattered all throughout Victoria. Like I was speaking with kids in Geelong, right, and the same things they were experiencing in the 8 year 9 are the same things that I was experiencing in the 8 year 9. Like how many years ago, right? So what that showed me is nothing has changed. There's the regardless of the now the question we have to ask ourselves is the training being done effective? Is it just done so the school gets like a stamp saying they're culturally inclusive, or is it performative, or is it actually making a difference?
Or the influences, are the influences that encourage you to be discriminatory and all of that too strong, that regardless of this training, regardless of these efforts made, that everything else happening is just overriding it? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think that, what you were saying, Mohammed, in terms of there are things in place, but obviously these experiences continue to happen. And I think that sometimes, especially when we have things like cultural competency training in organizations, and we have this awareness, it's very easy for people to kind of remove themselves from being part of the problem. And so I think a lot of the time people speak about racism being, a bad thing, or discrimination being a negative thing, yet they don't see how they themselves perpetuate that. And so I think especially in organizations and institutions, I think people need to really turn inwards as well as outwards in understanding, what am I doing? How am I benefiting from, racist systems and racist policies? And then kind of doing the work, and that work in understanding and acknowledging their own positionalities in order to actually make effective change. Because as you said, there's awareness, there's training out there, but these things are still going on. So we need to really kind of look inwards and kind of look to the deeper issues, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think
feel like we have to.
Oh, sorry, Lydia, go for it.
Sorry. I feel like you have to follow through as well, because it's almost as if, like he identified, the things that happened 8 years ago are still happening today. But the difference is, and how to kind of push change forward, is follow through, because the system does actually have regulations and acts in place, but they won't actually do anything for you until you go and hold them accountable, according to those acts in place. So it's kind of like, if we keep stopping at the sort of immediate level where we experience that level of racism or that discrimination and just leave it there, then we're just going to keep perpetuating those things. But if we keep pushing things to the system, like in Mohammed's instance, drive real change,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a very good point. And just to reiterate what she said, I feel like you're always going to experience like something from someone, right? But I feel like the moment we start, like imagine, right? So there's thousands of teachers across Victoria, right? There's thousands of employees, like millions, everything. So you're bound to get people that don't like view things from like your perspective or whatever. But the moment that's addressed on the highest level, that's when like it won't happen again. So
That's where the fear, though, it's not like, oh, you've touched my heart, I really want to change. It's, oh crap,
Yeah.
I'm scared that now the law, you can actually do something about this. So it
Fear
plays to
drives
Lydia's
change
point.
then.
So it seems, yeah, like you said earlier, that you really have to know the system to change anything. But I feel like it's unfair that young people have to all of a sudden become lawyers and doctors and every other thing. You have to become an expert in everything to be able to just live your life. And kids aren't just allowed to be kids who are clueless. You're not allowed to. A lot of young people know their rights so well. When they walk out into the street, they know all the questions to ask. And I was like, damn, I didn't know any of this stuff growing up. But now they have to pretty much become lawyers to defend themselves, to make sure that no injustices happen to them, because a lot of times people play on the fact that you don't know what's going on, that you don't know what to do, to kind of bully you into submission and into doing things that you don't want to do. So
and
it's, yeah.
and if I was just to add on that, I feel it's very important that we start having control of our own narratives. I'll give you an example. So every time I go on a train or I go in public, I feel like I always have to smile. I always have to look sexy. I always have to, show other people that they can be comfortable around me. Sometimes I'll sit on the train next to a lady, and she'll like hold on to her purse, or she'll put the phone in the pocket, because there's that fear, right? And like, yeah, so right now, what's being put on the media, what's being put like the mainstream political debate, is a negative image about Africans and Australians in particular. Right? So that's why I feel like it's very important that we start controlling our narrative, because there's a lot of people in the community that are doing well. There's a lot of intellectuals, there's a lot of creatives, there's a lot of advocates, but that doesn't like go with what like the political debate that's happening right now. So yeah, so the more we start highlighting the good in our community, that's when we start changing the narrative.
That's it. And we've got a comment from Liz. I'll just read it out and then we can continue. Says, big ups team. Anyways, the actual comment that I wanted to read was, so true, Roshani. There are processes and systems everywhere to deal with race-based discrimination, but it is the invisibility of how systems perpetuate inequality that white people and organizations really struggle with.
The invisibility. Yeah, that's true. Also, guys, I just want to clarify, earlier I said that fear drives change. I can't let this finish without saying that love also drives change.
A bit of both.
Okay.
A little bit of dictatorship, a little bit of love.
That's it.
Yeah. And I think that, just that example, Mohammed, that you were giving of, when you're on the train and you might kind of feel that those negative narratives being perpetuated just in, those daily interactions. I want to talk about a bit about like the emotional labor that sometimes it takes to have to show up. Like you might be having a bad day, which everybody has, and you may not be able to show up with a smile and kind of go about your day, but there's that kind of negative perpetuation that kind of occurs, particularly for BIPOC people, that it can be really difficult for them, and it's that labor of always having to think about those negative stereotypes being perpetuated, and therefore you need to act a certain way. What do you think that I guess that does, is particularly to young people, and I guess how is it navigating those things and knowing that those are things that are just on your mind and that you always have to be I guess concerned about?
Yep. So what that does for me is it creates a sense of either you become what is expected or you're not going to be accepted, right? And what we've seen now is that a lot of these like younger kids in our community are saying, okay, we don't want to be accepted. If that's how we're going to be accepted, if I have to change myself, if I have to change my hair, if I have to change how I dress, that's the only way I'm going to be accepted, then it's easier just to, I guess, be what everyone, I guess, views me as, than not be myself, right? And like, yeah, for me, for example, right? Like, I don't wear suits, you know. I have an afro. You see me wearing like trackies and stuff. So, like, when I'm out in public, when I tell people what I do, there's a bit of like, oh, you know, how can you look like this and, you know, and do what you do? So it's very important that we tackle the preconceptions about how someone's meant to look to be successful.
Absolutely. And that also goes back to the hair thing. I don't know if you saw that there was a trend where people were Googling professional hairstyles, and all of them were like white cuts, you know, type thing, long hair put back in a pony. And when you type in unprofessional hairstyles, guess who comes up? All the black people, even with the nice fresh cuts, they're considered unprofessional. And it's just like, what the hell? And I think that was a big driver in me chopping off my hair, honestly, because I'm like, you know what? For so long, we've been made to feel ashamed about our hair, about the way we look, about being African or a person of color. And for you to be classified as beautiful or successful or just worthy of society, you're supposed to try and level up and match up, you know, with the long flowy hair. Like, come on now. So I'm like, nah, I'm going to go against that. I am a professional. I'm going to chop my hair off and walk around like this. And let's see what anyone has to say.
You have to take control of your narrative.
Facts.
That's it.
Facts. And I think we should have like crazy hair day, as someone called it. So a friend of mine. I
remember that in school.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, her niece is biracial, and in like prep, so they were babies. You know, one of the days she didn't want to have her hair done up. Kids don't always want to do that. And she went to school, and one of the teachers were like, wow, all right, so next week we're going to have crazy hair day so that, you know, this little girl can feel not out of place. And it's like, what do you mean? Her hair ain't crazy. So it was like an insult that they try to make sound like they were doing something for her. Yeah.
I have a question after this, guys, for Mohammed. So do you think that the onus is totally on the colored person or the black person experiencing or confronting a situation of potential racism? Or do you feel like as the black person, depending on how you carry yourself in a situation, you can either welcome more racism or not? Like, do you think that there's any onus on us to carry ourselves in a certain way in order to like mitigate our experience in this country with discrimination?
Like, we shouldn't, but sadly, like how like society is set up, how like the political like system is set up, you know, like we can't help it, right? Yeah, so there's certain I guess like environments and stuff where I'm gonna have to act like a certain way, you know.
You have to code switch, play the part.
Yeah, so I hope things can change, and I'm trying to push that change, but it's just how society is set up right now. Like, yeah, there's certain situations where you're gonna have to, I guess, like, it's sad to say, but you're gonna have to like fit inside the narrative.
I really work hard
the emotional
to like,
labor part.
Go against that. I'm just gonna be my weird self, and if you don't like it, you don't like it. Like, what are you gonna do? Call the police on me? I haven't done anything wrong. So I think the only thing that you should do to mitigate anything is just don't commit crimes, you know, just act right. No one else can.
Be a law-abiding citizen.
That's it. Be a normal person. But I just hate the fact, and the thing is, I say that, but I'm sure subconsciously I have changed my attitude or changed the way that I speak or the way I carry myself in white space, you know, that I differently to what I would in a black space. Even listening to music with the N-word. When I used to work in a retail store, all of my white friends did play that music, and I was the one feeling uncomfortable. I'm like, I feel like everyone's looking at me like I'm this hooligan that's promoting this stuff, and they're like, what the hell? Like, why are you the one uncomfortable with it? And I'm like, I'm not comfortable with it at all.
Mohammed, what are we gonna say?
Yeah. So I'll be honest, right? There was a lot of opportunities that I turned down and a lot of doors that I closed for myself because I decided not to take that route of because I'm always big on staying true to myself, right? So yeah, so there were a lot of opportunities that I did turn down because I had to change who I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, I was just going to say that it's funny because I think there are a lot of young people out there that are allowed to make mistakes. There are a group of young people that are allowed to make mistakes, allowed to fumble, and then a group of young people that are not. And it's always at the, the BIPOC or the particularly culturally diverse young people. It's like you're not allowed to make those mistakes that young people are just allowed to make. And I think that, it goes back to what Lydia was saying, is the onus on culturally diverse or Black people or BIPOC people, but I think that young people are allowed to be upset if they feel attacked. They're allowed to be emotional if they feel that somebody is like doing something that is discriminatory. And I think it's taking that away and just expecting young people almost to grow up and just to be the bigger person in every situation. And I think that is taxing. That's very taxing.
It's so taxing. There's a pressure to act in such a balanced way in this context, because on one hand, you want to protect, on one hand, you have the right to be upset, like you said, and naturally you're going to have these reflexive emotions towards what you experience. But then on the other hand, you have to maintain like discipline and self-control and even patience, and understand that now there's a process to getting your to solving this situation, which is happening immediately in front of you. So that emotional intelligence, insightfulness that we have to develop from a really young age is very taxing, and it does kind of strip us of our innocence in a way.
Totally unfair.
Just I guess it's one of those things, like you said, Mohammed, where it is what it is. Like, and now it doesn't mean we leave it as it is, but it's more like it is what it is. So there are certain things that are part of this whole conversation that we just have to accept as reality, and then push forward where we have room to, because we live in a harsh world.
Guys, please feel free to throw up any comments you might have for Mohammed, and we will directly ask. So I'm looking forward to it. And if you're just tuning in, we are Colored Minds with Lydia, AD, and Roshani on Brimbank Live with our amazing guest, Mohammed Semra. And we're just talking deep things about code switching, about being a person of color, and just trying to navigate the world, really, as a human, as a young person, and on top of all of that, as a colored young person, which seems to just make things so much more difficult. Like, you wake up sometimes and you just want to walk down the street and forget about your worries and be silly, but you're not allowed to. You always have to police yourself and regulate yourself and make sure that you're not seeming threatening to anyone, which is just unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. But is there anything that you'd like to see change? I know we spoke a lot about a lot of policies coming through now. Organizations and schools and whatnot are now willing to listen and come and sit down at the table and talk to people. Is there what more do we need, do you think, to keep things moving, to create that change?
I guess it all comes down to representation. We need more representation, and we need more people that are in our community that directly represent us, speaking for us. When you have other people that we've never seen or never heard about that are speaking on our behalf, I guess it makes progression really difficult, because there's certain experiences that we as a collective share that someone that doesn't, I guess, look like us or come from where we come from cannot, I guess, speak on what we've been through. So it's very important that the right people are in the right table speaking about the right things.
Exactly, because in that instance, it's like they're not even able to effectively convey our message. So like if they're talking, they're just talking and just making noise in a lot of situations. That's true.
I think, Lydia, yesterday when we had a little chat about this, we were talking about, I guess, penetrating, assaulting all of those spaces with our presence, right? All of those, I don't know, environments that weren't created for us or made for us. And you said something about potentially creating a seat or creating our own table, you know, making our own spaces. Mohammed, what do you think in that regard? Do you think that we should, as people of color, just start making our own tables instead of trying to get into these spaces that, you know, aren't for us?
Yep. So I'm big on creating our own platforms, right? And because it's very important, if you own your platform, it can't get taken away right now. But if you use someone else's platform and you're speaking on someone else's stage, then at any given moment you can just get pushed to the side, right?
Yeah.
But if we as a community own our stuff and we, you know, that's when we control our message and we can speak about the real issue. Because I'm going to be honest, right? There's a lot of discussions that we can't have on other platforms, right? Because it's going to make people uncomfortable. So yeah, so that's why I'm big on controlling our own platform. That's when we should, and that's we can start controlling the political debate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like when we do that, that's when we can tell our own stories, as you were saying, and also tell our stories in a way that aren't reconfigured or you know, misconstrued in other ways. Because I think that sometimes when other people do tell these stories, that they tell these stories in a way that's palatable, I guess, to the white person or to particular systems, and also tell these stories in a way that isn't, I guess, sincere and true to the stories that we tell. So yeah, definitely creating our own spaces can do that, because we have autonomy over the platform that we've created, as well as the stories that we're telling through those platforms as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much to unpack around this stuff. It can go on forever. And what I'm excited about for this whole series is that we will be talking about discrimination and anti-discrimination, but in different spaces. You know, this was just a general chat about having to police ourselves and what's out there. But, you know, moving on forward, we'll be talking about, you know, the education space, the medical space. I forgot what else is there. All these
mental
different
health space,
mental health space.
all the spaces.
Yeah,
all the
because we
spaces
really, all the spaces. We really need to
that we're trying to penetrate.
Exactly. We're trying to assault. I love that word. I'm like, yeah, it sounds about right. You know, like you said, fear creates change. Like we can't just come in slowly. I'm tired of.
We can't just come in smiling like, hey,
nice, and please let me in. I'm in. I'm coming in, whether you like it or not. Like, I'm coming in.
Oh, we're hilarious.
We've got Mohammed back. So Mohammed, we want to wrap up now. Is there any last thoughts or advice that you give to the next person who has experienced something like yourself, or next time finds themselves in a position where they really want to get mad? You know, some injustice is going on and they want to throw hands or throw some words around. What is your advice to them?
So I have two advices. One would be understand the bigger picture and know what you want. And two, to never self-reject. Because I feel sometimes what's easy to do is not see yourself represented in a particular situation, right? And say, you know what, I'm not even going to apply because I won't get it. Or what you're doing there is you're missing a shot that you haven't even taken. So that's what my philosophy is. I apply for everything. I sign up for everything. And, you know, what I get is what I get. But at least I know for myself that I at least went halfway. So, yeah.
Your story is really, really powerful, and
doing that. Yeah.
and really inspiring. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the community on my behalf. Obviously, AD will wrap up officially. I strongly believe BIPOC communities, people/communities creating and building their own spaces is integral for their ownership and freedom of autonomy. That's Ierus's comment. And I just wanted to say, actually wanted to add to that I really agree with that, because that's where you can drive support, resources, all of that. If you don't have a platform or a space, then where are you going to drive all of these things to accumulate, the asset or whatever it is. So yeah, let's start.
I feel like
owning things.
To me, it sounds like reverse cancel culture. It's like, if you don't want to let us in, we're just going to take all of ourselves and go here and not invest. Yeah. So it is what it is. So it is a great way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And it's what countries do to punish each other. Remember, this is how in the political world, this is what they literally do, as sort of, instead of war, they punish each other like this.
They say that's like the feminine war, where it's just they ignore you instead of fighting with you. It's like, we're done. We're not going to be a part of this. You no longer get my energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much, Mohammed, for sharing your story and giving us advice. You've been amazing. What do we have to look forward to? Is there anything coming up in the near future for you? Any speakerships that you're engaged in? Anything we should be looking out for? And maybe plug in your social medias as well while we're here.
So for the near future, I'm going to be focusing on Endeavour Youth Australia. So that's a social enterprise where our main goal is to identify and invest in like the young multicultural nation. And we do that mainly through schools, through community centers. And it's about changing the narrative. So finding those people that, those young people that are doing good or want to do good, and just giving them the resources to do so. So, yeah.
Amazing. Are you planning on running for council again?
We'll see how that goes. Most likely.
Yes.
She thought she was going to get an inside scoop.
Good. Well, no, I'll be there voting for. I might not be in your council space, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try and coerce.
She'll move houses for
you.
Yeah, I'll move houses.
Yeah. Done.
Thank you so much for today. We really appreciated your time. You were listening to Coloured Minds on Brimbank Live with your hosts, AD, Roshani, and Lydia. And the fantastic Mohammed Semra was here joining us. Until next time, everybody, have a great night, stay safe, and keep fighting the power.